Hello everyone and welcome to Linux Quest. Well, I've got a confession to make. It has been many moons since I have installed and set up and run Manjaro, and that's what this video is going to be about. There's no doubt that the popularity of Manjaro has risen in the ranks quite a bit in the past 6 months or so. Now, I've started getting into some of these community polls with you, the viewer, and if you haven't found that or seen that before, to toot the horn of a Linux Quest here, if you go to the main page and you go over to the community tab, that's where we post the polls that you've been participating in. Our last poll had well over 500 votes. I think we were up closer to 700. This one is, what is your favorite Arch-based OS? And clearly here, Manjaro is in the lead with a whopping 48%. So I'll go back over to home real quick just to say, if you want to participate in this, you go to the community tab here on the main page, and you'll be able to place your vote as well as add a comment why you voted that way if you care to. Right now we have 57 votes in place, or excuse me, 57 comments in place with 303 votes. We're going to leave this up for a couple of days, and then I'll do a video going through all of your comments and what the results were. So just kind of wanted to plug that. But just got a fresh install of Manjaro 17.1.11. This was released July 2nd with updates to LibreOffice, PMAC, Calamares, lots of updates for the KDE version. So you've got 3 main versions here that you could download. XFCE is their tried and true default, if you will. KDE, which is becoming more and more popular, I think becoming more popular even with Manjaro users, and then the GNOME or GNOME desktop. So I really debated whether to go with the KDE version, because you're seeing here a very updated 5.13.2, and lots of the updates in this particular fresh spin apply to KDE Plasma. Qt updates, KDE framework, so on and so forth. For XFCE, they got 4.14, XF desktop and XF settings were updated. They added the latest Mesa drivers, including fixed crashes. Systemd was introduced to version 239 here. Latest kernels got added. Latest LibreOffice at 6.0 or 6.0.5. And they released Manjaro Tools version 0.158. So there's more here to read through. So this is probably going to be a long video. I've got a lot to go through here, and I don't want to get overexcited about what I'm seeing so far and blurt out a bunch of, oh my gosh, I can't believe this, where have you been, Manjaro, all of my life kind of stuff. So I want to give it some time, I want to pace it, but what I'm seeing so far with this fresh install, especially after coming off of a couple of other distros on this particular system, this system has a Radeon card, which Manjaro picked up for the open source drivers quite nicely, and has a Ryzen GPU with 8 gigs of RAM. And so far this system's very, very snappy, and I'll just say that I have been running KDE, the Plasma desktop, for some time, which runs very well on this same system. I was dual booting there for a while with a couple of other systems, but I've just noticed some things in speed in general here. And as I said, it's been many moons since I've run Manjaro, so I want to kind of contain my excitement with the speed I'm getting here so far. Not only the speed within the desktop or the operating system in general, but also I want to talk to the speed in the package manager. I went in and refreshed everything, set up the AUR, so I went into that option under preferences. Let's get our password in here and set up the AUR here. Got that turned on. Went over to the official repositories, just left the mirror here at worldwide and did a refresh. And I've just got to speak to this. Number one, everything that I've installed, and we're talking about things like Kdenlive, which by the way opens up and looks beautiful after installing the Breeze icon set. everything I've set up, simple screen recorder, just a few other things, has been incredibly fast with the install process. So someone has tweaked out the repository / servers that everything's tying into, because this makes Antergos I always say Antergos. This makes Antergos seem like a slow dog when it comes to working with installation through the package manager and everything. And not only that, but there are a couple of things that for whatever reason on my last few installs of Antergos, where certain packages that were within the AUR just simply would not install. They would fail. And one of those happened to be the Microsoft Core fonts, which I found here, and I don't know if that was pulled in from the Manjaro repositories or if that was coming in through the AUR. However, it installed flawlessly, whereas with Antergos it would fail out. Every version I found would fail out. So big plus there. So next I'd like to talk about the theming and everything that's in place with Manjaro. And one of the things that they have been able to pull off better than probably any other distro out there using XFCE as their default desktop is to make XFCE look modern and I think really attractive. They've paid attention to detail throughout the system, so when you launch into things like the file manager, for example, all the colors and everything is all matching within the theme as it should, and it gives the operating system a really polished modern feel because of that. And XFCE oftentimes gets a bad rap for not looking modern and not looking up to date. And I'll just, as a side note here, maybe you're someone who is brand new to Linux and you're just now discovering all of the different operating systems out there, and maybe you're not familiar with what XFCE is. XFCE is simply the desktop. It's the GUI or GUI, the way you interact with the base operating system. So that's what XFCE is. There are a couple of versions of desktops, or there are a couple of variations of desktop, some that are drastically different than others. And XFCE is especially good in that there's flexibility with customization, so you can change things. You can change these colors we're seeing here and things like that. And again, I'm speaking to someone who's maybe never seen this before. But the other really big benefit with XFCE is that it's very light on system resources. So if you're kind of in a discovery mode for Linux, and maybe you've got an old system that you want to try this on, but because it's an old system, you have maybe only 4 gigs of RAM or less, with an older, say, 7 or 8 year old processor, then this particular distribution with XFCE or any other Linux distribution with the XFCE desktop will be a good option for you because it'll use less system resources. All right, so that's my side note if you're someone new to Linux. All right, so back to the theming. So all of this is in place, and we'll just pop over here and take a look at the wallpaper. So what you're seeing now, wallpaper-wise, is the default wallpaper. And I had earlier one set up here. So this one, which is really nice, but you'll see a nice selection here of all Manjaro themed wallpapers. So that's an area again where they get an A+ with the theming and helping XFCE to stay very modern looking. And we'll pop over and look at the icons here with the folders. You have to like green. I think their tint of green has changed maybe a little bit, but the icons are very polished. You get some hue color changes as you hover over, some transitions, and those are nice little touches that just gives it a really nice feel, and it's a good indicator. So nicely done. Now what you're seeing, again, if you're someone new, what you're seeing here can be changed in look and appearance, and so we'll hop over to that real quick just to give you an idea of what that's like. So we could go into appearance here, and then from there, let's just say you weren't real happy with those green vertex icons, and you wanted to try something different. I was thrilled to see, and I don't remember this from my previous installs again, been some time that they now include vibrancy, which is and has been one of my favorite icon sets. So we're going to switch over to vibrancy colors, and we'll just take a quick look at that. And we'll go ahead and close out. And you'll see here that the desktop folder changed, and now these folders here have changed color as well. So that's just one of the ways that you can tweak the theme here. And with XFCE, there are lots of other things that you can do with color of the panel here at the bottom, things like that. But needless to say, very pleased, and again an A+ for Manjaro with what they've done here in the theming with XFCE. Also, I'm going to give them an A for speed. The speed I've experienced since I did this, and you know what? A fresh install always seems fast. And I want to be fair and give it some time, and we'll just see if that speed remains. But so far, I'm really, really impressed. So we're going to go back to desktop settings, and we'll pop back over to, oh, excuse me. Let's come back out of here. I lost my mind for a minute. We'll go into settings. We'll go over to appearance, and we're going to go ahead and change this up and get into a little bit of blue. Go back to dark there, and we'll switch over to the icons. Let's see if we've got any blue in the icons, and I don't think we do. We do have teal, which looks nice, so we'll switch over to that, and we'll take another quick look. You'll see that's teal here. Now, those look really nice. Still a shade of green. See if anything changed here, and you'll notice here that the whisker menu has changed as well. And that's a big plus as far as I'm concerned, is with XFCE on Manjaro, you don't get just the plain Jane single line application launcher. You get the whisker menu, which is very, very easy to configure and set up. You could have, for example, all of your main categories over here on the left instead of where they are on the right. You have descriptions here for the different applications. You could turn that off or on. So let's hop in real quick. I warned you this was going to be a long video, so let's just go ahead and jump in, and I'll show you these changes I'm talking about. So right now you have some options. As soon as you right click, and let me back up to this, go to properties, and you have some options right now on this first tab up here under appearance. And one of those is show application descriptions. So if you turn that off, and we're just going to make this one change, if you turn that off, what you'll notice now is that the descriptions on the application is now gone. To me, that gives it a cleaner appearance. But if you're someone new and you're just experiencing this for the first time, it's really helpful to have that description there, because I promise you, coming from, say, the Windows world or coming from a Mac world, you're not going to know what a lot of this software is here. It's just going to be foreign to you. So having that description is probably something handy. If you're more familiar with Linux, but maybe you're not familiar with the whisker menu here, and you like things to look clean and uncluttered, to me that's a good option to turn off. It just simplifies things. All right, so let's go back in from there and go back into properties one more time. Now, I personally like to have the categories, the main categories, over on the left, and so we're going to position that series of categories over to the left here by clicking Position Categories next to the panel button. So we'll make that change. And now you'll see the categories here. Now there's some other things we can do. Right now the icons here are pretty large. So we're going to go in and make one more change, and then I'll move away from the theming side of things, because I've done lots of other videos on changing the settings of the whisker menu. So we'll go back in, and we're going to make the item icon, we'll take that down to smaller. And then for the category icon size, we're going to just turn that completely off and choose none. So that'll be the last change we make to the whisker menu. And so now you just see the wording here for the category, and you'll see a much smaller icon there. And that's the other nice thing about the whisker menu, is you can scroll this thing way down. Maybe you're someone who just quickly searches here, you know, for what you want. You'll see how fast that is just by typing in KDE for Kdenlive. You see how quickly that pops up. So, you know, maybe you just keep that really small and down here. Maybe you're someone who likes to have this thing all the way to the top. It's really up to you, and that's the beauty of Linux. You've got so many options and so many variations and ways to do things. While that can be overwhelming at first, it's fun and addictive once you get into it. So, all right, well, that's enough for theming. Now I want to talk about some other things, and that's getting into the system side of things. So next up, let's just take a look at the kernel options. We're going to slide over to the Manjaro Settings Manager, and you can get to that quickly and find some of the other Manjaro specific settings and things like the user guide, which we'll take a look at just by typing in Manjaro. Start to type Manjaro and you'll see this pop right up. So we'll jump over to the Settings Manager. And so I want to point out one of the features of Manjaro here is the ability to select or update your kernel. So we're going to get into that. Now, if you're new to Linux and you're asking yourself right now, well, what is the kernel? And you'll hear this tossed around quite a bit. The kernel is, I guess a good analogy would be, if you were going to think of the human body, the kernel would equate to the brain or perhaps the heart. I mean, it's certainly one of your major vital organs. So, you know, you can't live without a heart and you can't live without your brain. So we'll think of the brain here for a moment for the Linux kernel. It is the part that ties in together your system programs. And so it's a very vital part of the operating system. You typically don't have to interact with it unless you're in a case or scenario like this, where as you start to get more and more into Linux and you start to read into what is being done and developed with the kernel. And by the way, the kernel is developed by thousands of people all around the world with the guidance of Linus Torvalds, who was the originator. And that's where Linux gets its name. He was the originator of the kernel itself. He came up with this for his own system. But since then, it is something that is continually updated, and it's really what helps you or helps your particular Linux system run everything like your USB ports, your mouse and your keyboard, everything, hardware and everything, all ties back into the kernel. So it needs to be rock solid and stable so that your operating system is stable. And if you're watching this and you're new to Linux, just know that Android, which is more than likely a device you've had at some point, Android phones and Android tablets, they also use and rely on the Linux kernel. The nice thing here within Manjaro is you have the option, and it clearly shows you what you have installed and running. You have the option to update that. So where would that be a benefit to you? Well, maybe you've got some newer hardware and maybe previous older kernels don't support that hardware, but updated kernels, and this is information you can find. There are a multitude of places you can go online to see what updates have been applied to the kernel. Maybe your newer hardware is supported in version 4.16, for example, and so if you install Manjaro, you have a problem with that hardware peripheral or whatever, then that support's been added. So here they make it convenient and easier for you to install that updated kernel. That was probably a long way to say all of that, but it's a very nice part of the Manjaro operating system. And this is also available in other Linux operating systems, but I think Manjaro's done a very good job implementing that. So next up, I want to talk a little bit about the package manager, and that's where you go to add and remove software within Manjaro. And I believe I talked about this earlier. The speed here with Manjaro is much improved over some other Arch-based distros. Well, in particular, I was speaking to Antergos, which is one of my all-time favorite distros. If you go back and look at a lot of my videos, I have a lot of praise for Antergos. I always feel like I have to say it that way since I started it. But anyway, but again, I want to speak to you if you're new. I don't want you to get freaked out about, a package manager. So I'm just going to try to put that in its simplest terms, and we'll go ahead and maximize this. Just think about this as a large filing cabinet, and inside that filing cabinet are packages, or let's just say bits of software programs. Put it in its simplest terms, programs. And these programs are here, and they are all free. So gone are the days of where you have to go to a website and then pay money for a specific piece of software that does a specific thing, biting that it's here. Chances are you're going to find something that is similar to what you've used in other operating systems. You're going to find that, chances are, within Linux with enough searching. So you can search by description. So for example, here, let's say I wanted to find something for drawing. So I can type in drawing, and in doing so, you're going to pull up all kinds of different packages. Now, some of this will be hit and miss. So here's a painting tool, here, Penta. Here's one. This is an icon previewer for artists and developers. So while Cuttlefish is not for drawing, it's it's somewhat related to graphics and that kind of thing. So that's why I say it'll be kind of hit and miss. So here's Tux Paint. So maybe if you used Paint within Microsoft, you could try this out. You can also go through here, look at this list, and then take a look here. Well, here you go, Carbon. Now there's a pretty nice high-end program for getting into digital drawing, that kind of thing. Now the other one here that just didn't show up, and that has to do with graphics. So if we just type in graphics, you're going to get another list. So just to give you this idea, you can really search for about anything, but you're going to get a mix mash. You're not going to just zero in on everything that's graphic related. But then you can also, there are a multitude of places where you can search for software now that you could say Paint for Linux, just as an example. And here you see GIMP, which is really popular. It's popular inside the Linux world for anybody who does any type of graphics or drawing or anything like that digitally, and it's also popular outside of Linux. So that that's kind of an indicator of how good some of these Linux programs are. Excuse me. So that just is to give you a quick idea. Now there are other ways to find the software, and you can do that through categories. So here you'll see with this particular package manager, you could go to audio video, and it's got everything categorized for you. And then the other way is, of course, if you know the name of the program, of course, that's the quickest, easiest way. And I'm going to use Kdenlive, for example. If I know that's exactly what I want to install, then it's going to zero down. So I didn't want to make it look too hard, but just give you enough idea of what it is you're doing when you're inside of the package manager. So once you have selected what you need, it's just a matter of clicking install or apply in most cases, and you'll be able to watch that progress, and then that program will have installed. It'll finish. Hopefully it'll finish fast. In the case of Manjaro, things are moving along fast. And then you can go back into the corresponding category and you'll find that app. So here we see Kdenlive. Now with an Arch-based distribution as opposed to something like Ubuntu, which is, if you're new to Linux, I'm sure you've heard of Ubuntu, there are some differences there with the way these packages and / repositories are managed. On an Arch-based distro like this, there is something called the AUR, which is the Arch User Repository. And essentially, the idea behind it, or really kind of what you'll discover, is that the Arch user repository is probably the largest resource out there for every bit of Linux software, be it some of it's not even open source, some of it is proprietary, and it's just like one gigantic dumping ground for every piece of software you can imagine. Now that's good and bad, because if you kind of mess around with Arch long enough, what you'll discover is that some of these packages or programs are introduced maybe before they should be. Sometimes there could be issues there, and that's one of the areas where I think Manjaro probably does a better job than Antergos does, because they have their own repository. So if you didn't have this part turned on, and we're going to go over to where you could turn that off, if you really wanted to play it safe, you could go in. I've turned it on, but by default it's off. So you could keep this off, and now you're just pulling from the Manjaro official repositories. And I'm not going to say that will be perfect either, but some people argue that you could get into a little bit of trouble maybe with some of the packages you're pulling in from the AUR. So that's probably not the best description anyone could do, but hopefully that'll help you get an understanding of how you're accessing the software here. And that's essentially all you got to think of. Is if you've run Windows, you've downloaded before what ends in a .exe, an executable file. Well, here you don't even have to download it. You just go here, click on it, click apply, and it will install it. It's really that easy. It's truly amazing when you think about it, compared to, okay, let me download this, let me get a pop-up from Windows that says, are you sure you want to install this? Are you sure you want to keep this file? This file could harm your system. Yes. Now you got to click next, and you want to point it to the directory you want to install it. All these steps, that all goes away with this. This is a much simpler way to do it, much easier. It's faster in most cases. All right, so have fun, install tons of software, check it all out if you want to. You can spend days and hours going through exploring just an incredible vast array of Linux software. Now, one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pop over here. This is PMAC 6.4.0-3. So I believe maybe that was recently updated, maybe that was part of it. Alright, is this video long enough for you? So I want to cover a few other things real quick. Let's go into the file manager. And, Thunar is perfectly capable. That is the file manager that you see here. It's a part of the XFCE desktop. It is a perfectly capable file manager, but one thing Manjaro has put in place here that I want to point out is you've got, by right-click, Thunar root, which is fantastic. So let me jump into that for you if you're new to Linux. So up here is your file system, and this is where all of the pertinent operating system files are kept. Now, Linux is a very safe operating system in that, number one, there aren't a ton of viruses that you find out there for Linux compared to Windows. It's not even close. And it even has fewer viruses than you would find for Mac. And some of that's due to the part that not as many people are running Linux systems, although that's changing. Nevertheless, the other reason that Linux is safe and secure is because this root part of the system is not something that outside sources can gain super easy access to. Now, I'm not saying that it's impossible. There are a multitude of reasons how that could happen. So I guess I'll back up to say there are times when you do want access to root. And that's when you get into things like changing your system, changing your desktop. Maybe you want to apply certain icon packs or things like that. There's tons of reasons why you would want to get root access. Well, sometimes that can be difficult. Sometimes in some systems you actually have to do that through the terminal, which would be typing command lines. Or if you get a really good development team in place and they understand that people want to use their system with ease these days, and they want to use it graphically, you'll get features like this, which is Thunar root. And that will give you access, after you've typed in your password, to actually access these system files and folders and allow you to copy things over into various places, or to go in and edit and change things. That is, if you know what you're doing. And I'll just caution you, when you go into that, you don't, just like on any other operating system, you don't want to go in and say, I don't know what that is, I'm just going to delete that. You never want to do that. But from the standpoint of ease of use, and for people who understand what it is they're doing with their system, right click and having right there root access is awesome. So that's one of the user-friendly parts of Manjaro that I think this and a multitude of other things, and I could go on and on and on, I think, with this operating system and many other Linux operating systems. But at some point we have to cut these videos. But at any rate, that's one of the nice features. The other thing I want to speak to is just the community in general. And so let's just jump over here and we'll go to the forum. And with any operating system like you see here, if you're finding your way around for the first time, even for some experienced users, at some point you may need help. That could come in the form of maybe you've got an NVIDIA video card and you need help with the drivers. Depends on the video card that you have in your system, whether or not you might have that support for that particular hardware. And so you see here, if you go into the forum, you can find links directly to the hardware. So this is hardware related issues. And this is one of the things that I got feedback-wise from the overwhelming majority of people who were, voting for Manjaro as their most favorite operating system, is the community. You heard that a lot. You also heard from a lot of people, hey, it just works. I install it, it works, I don't have any issues, I don't have any problems, and it's stable. Now that wasn't my experience, oh gosh, a year or so ago, That wasn't my experience the last time I installed Manjaro. So I'm hoping that, what has happened to me in the past, where I'll install it, and after like a week or so, I start getting crashes and different things. So far that hasn't happened, but this is a fresh install, so I'm going to give it time. But if I do run into problems, my point is, I can come here and check and maybe see what's going on. Is it a hardware issue? Did I mess up something with updating? What about drivers? Things like that. So as you see here, you go from the home page, and this is links just kind of built into the browser, and you'll find that also in Hello Manjaro. And you can go over to the wiki if you want to have some fun with your morning coffee and read through the wiki here. But lots of good information, the overview, the how to get it, boot and startup, a lot of this information. Look how well this is done. A lot of this information is also in the Manjaro PDF. So this is documentation for beginners, and I love this. I absolutely applaud this, because you could copy this over to your tablet, you could copy this over to your phone even, and before you go through the install process, you could go through all of this and just make sure that you understand what it is you're doing and have guidance along every step. So, A+ rating for this kind of thing here. Maybe this PDF was in place before and I just missed it, but I love seeing this. This is the kind of thing, believe it or not, some of us out there would put this on our phone and enjoy every minute of reading through it. So, so great work, Manjaro team. All right, well, I got to wind things down here. There's probably so much more I could go through, but I know this is already an extremely long video. But needless to say, there may be a follow-up on this. And, I got to say, I can see, after not using Manjaro for a long time, I can see where the fanfare is around it, where the popularity is around it. And so time will tell. Alright, well, thanks for watching. If you liked this video or any of the other Linux Quest videos, please subscribe. We're getting close to the 10,000 milestone mark, and look forward to giving away some new Linux Quest t-shirts when that happens. So if you like what you saw here, please subscribe. Thanks for watching.